All right, we are back with another interview. Today we have Dujek, who is back for his second time in the CSM. Just a small reminder, the reason that we're doing these interviews first is to give each candidate their own platform so they can be heard, but it's also so that my communities, two of them, can make a decision on who to put on the ballot. So we're going to go through all the questions and analyze them, and then, it's up to my community to decide who they want. But we're going to start with go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your EVE experience and maybe a little bit about your CSM experience.
Hi, I'm Dujek Oneye. I fly with Brave Collective. I live in nullsec, but I'm pretty active in most other areas of space. I do a lot of tournament play. I enjoy that a lot. Now is tournament season, so I'm playing more EVE than I normally do, which is quite a bit. And other than that, I enjoy blopsing. I've lived in wormholes continuously since I started playing the game. Some of the time, because I'm a wormholer on my main, I don't always tell people who my wormhole characters are, but I'm out there having fun. And I haul a lot as well, which is a good thing to do like throughout the day when I can't commit to being on comms and paying full attention the whole time.
All right, excellent. So we talked a little bit earlier before we started recording, and you had mentioned that your platform has changed a little bit from last year. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about it?
The one thing that has changed about my platform is that I've been a year on the CSM and I've seen how the sausage is made to some extent. So like my top areas of my platform are still being supportive of new players, recruitment into EVE, making sure that there's always something to do for any length of play session. I also care a lot about game balance, whether that be ship balance or uh, economic balance in the game. But the last and perhaps like biggest new addition to my campaign this year is I saw people who on the CSM had like one singular main passion project to get to spend a lot of time with devs on that. And it took me a bit of time last year to find out what I really want to go for. And I think that having seen how the ship balance is done, I would really, really like to lobby for weapon tiericide to be added to one of the major expansions down the road.
Okay.
I don't expect that to happen immediately by any means, but like lay the groundwork to get this into an expansion in the medium to near future would be great.
Awesome. I like the sound of that. So we're going to go ahead and jump into a few questions that my communities have. And it also relates to my platform of getting players to undock. Currently, today in 2025, what do you think one of the biggest barriers to new players undocking is?
I think one of the biggest problems with new players is the fact that established players have played Eve and they know what the length of a game session in Eve is. If somebody says, we're going on a strat up, get in your battleship, get on the Titan, an established player will know that they're likely to be playing for like 2 to 3 hours at that point. Or say a wormhole eviction would take a week after planning to actually get through. Whereas what we really need in Eve is more exciting content that doesn't require that big of a time commitment to get players hooked. I recently, a few months ago, talked to somebody who posted on Reddit looking for an Eve mentor, which I quite enjoy doing, like talking to completely new players and kind of guiding them through the game and instilling in them like some of what I consider to be good life lessons for Eve, and she was quite busy, both like studying to be a nurse and also like having a life outside of Eve. And one of the things that struck me is that some activities like exploration, you can go and explore for half an hour and then dock up, and that's a play session. But it's actually quite hard to get people into like PvP in certain areas of space without committing more time to it. Like faction warfare does this quite well, and faction warfare also has kind of a reputation of being like baby's first PvP in a
Mm-hmm.
way. But I think that that should be for all areas of space. I think that
Yep.
no matter where you live, if you want to play for half an hour, there should be something to do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's why I am a big part of the MPSI community, because I know most fleets are going to last 2 hours, maybe three at the most. And I can plan my day around it because I can look at the calendar and say, oh, Bomber's Bar is going out tomorrow at 1800 Eve. Yeah, I have 2 hours. I can definitely do that. So, yeah, I totally agree that there needs to be more like this. What do you think the role of fleets are in player retention?
I think that fleets are what sets this apart from any other game in terms of like you won't continue playing this game, or like the vast majority of people won't continue playing this game if it's a solo experience. Even even mining fleets are better than just mining by yourself, and I'm not talking about boosts. I followed my new player around to see what they wanted to do and what kind of activities they wanted to try. And we tried like a wide variety of things, and we ended up having lots of fun going on a mining fleet, mining on R64 Moon while playing GeoGuessr and Scriblio with everyone who was in the fleet at the time. Uh, Narrowly avoiding being ganked because of it, but like everyone hanging out on comms, talking together, like making it a fun experience. Like anything could be fun if you're in a fleet, whereas a lot of activities that may lack a mini game associated with it, or like the rush of PvP, is going to be less fun if you're doing it alone, I think.
So, what type of features or tools do you think CCP could add to the game that gives communities ways to provide more content?
I have a lot of hope for the freelance projects going forward. I think that we've just scratched the surface in terms of like what we can get out of freelance projects. I think that letting them be used to advertise locations and times for fleets and getting people to participate, maybe getting them to do the handouts of the ships for them would be amazing. I would really like stuff like that. I mean, they're in the beginning stages. We're eventually going to get ACLs for them. I hope that maybe we could get like contracts tied to them. That's something that I've been pushing for. Other than that, I think that they have tried stuff where you can find like-minded people doing activities, like the Fleet Finder got an overhaul recently. I haven't used that a lot. I think that they might need some iteration, but all of this will work together to get people into fleets.
Cool. So, do you think that today in 2025, toxicity is keeping people from undocking still?
I think toxicity might make people wary of getting into comms in particular. I think that there's certain activities that are also considered toxic. I now that we're coming up on the Blood Festival, that's certainly one of the things that people were giving feedback where anything that encourages high sec ganking in particular felt a bit toxic to the players who uh, wanted to go and have a relaxed time and not worry about being killed over and
Mm-hmm.
over again. by gankers. So like I think it's twofold. I think that certain behaviors that would be characterized as griefing are considered toxic by the community, and there are ways to balance that to make it more fair across the board. And I think that like a general toxicity of like people being rude or bigoted or whatever will prevent certain groups from engaging in the community in the full breadth of how they could, like being on comms, being in fleet, and both of those are going to keep people from
Right.
undocking.
So
I think like both of these are being addressed slowly. I think that the changes to the 90% loot drop this year, maybe keep the 90% outside of high sec would be my best suggestion. And as far as like making the community nicer to each other, that's going to be an evergreen issue. Like it will never be solved, and we always have to work towards that.
So, of course, I've interviewed Oz already, and he had a few things to say about the Blood Hunt. How have players been reacting to you with that? Is it about 50-50 on love it, hate it, or what has been the overall sentiment on that?
I've heard like a lot of both, and I feel I'm split entirely down the middle. It was like last year was I quite vividly remember like sitting around in high second freighters waiting for people to just like get out of the way so that I could get on with my life, and that actually sucked a lot. Like hauling in jump freighters like on the route to Jita. And on the other hand, the PvP side of me and like the 90% loot drop from AT tournament flagships, stuff like that. I mean, I love the PvP side of it.
Yeah.
So I just think that it should be more granular. And for the record, I've been dying to be able to pod myself to like rescue some of the implants that have been sitting around forever doing nothing. So like I'm very conflicted in that if I was asked, should we do away with the 90% drop, I wouldn't say yes to that. But if they said, do you want it everywhere but high sec, I would absolutely want that. Even though maybe a couple of days of 90% in high sec, I don't think that high sec anchors should be not a thing. I think that that's a unique part of Eve, and it kind of deserves to exist. But I think that it should exist to punish particularly greedy people who
Right.
fly very expensive stuff recklessly, and not so much people just minding in their venture.
So, to piggyback on that, what type of content do you think actually keeps people logging in time after time?
I think play style pillars. It's one of those things where if you enjoy a certain aspect of Eve and you build up your way of doing that. Say like you want to be like a big ship industrialist and you want to integrate your supply your entire chain of production, and you go and you mine and you react the stuff and eventually build a dreadnought. That's like a good progression of keeping logging in, like you're building towards a goal. Whereas if what you really like in Eve is dropping dreads on people, that's a little bit too rare these days. I
Right.
think that if you find a playstyle that you really like, that playstyle should be more or less supported so that it's not a rare event that the thing that you like to do is happening. So in terms of if you rat a null sec and you get escalations and you get more stuff to do, like having I'm trying to phrase this a little bit more eloquently. Like some things should be rare, but they should be like a big payoff special thing that you get for having done like the base activity a lot. Whereas PvP and having something to do every time you undock, that can't be a rare occurrence.
Right.
Like I've lived in wormholes a lot. We refer to how like the connections are as space weather, and there are days when you log on and you scan down in all directions, 3 jumps, and you just don't find anything to do, and you're like, ah, the space weather today is bad. I guess we're logging off and trying again another day. And this might also be particularly applicable to people who live in like off time zones. If
Mm-hmm.
you're in USTC wormhole space like I am, or in AUTC Savinol or something, like there's a little bit less to do. I think that people keep logging in when there's stuff to do. And we need to make sure that people meet up in the game in order to shoot each other or mine with each other or whatever else they want to do.
Do you have any advice for people who are like a single activity player, the person that comes in and only mines, and then, CCP messes with it and they're like, they mess with my mining, or the people who did high sec forward bases and now, they no longer exist in high sec and they move to low sec. What would you say to these players? And how do you think you can possibly smooth this out, between CCP and these players?
I have one particular player in mind when I think of high sec forward operating bases, and like I don't really know many other people like by name who do it, but when they told us that the forward operating bases were moving, I thought, oh no, that particular player, and like they're gonna quit or they're just gonna have a bad time. Luckily, there are a lot of like adjacent things in Eve to do, but I think find something that you really like to do and then find another thing that you really like to do just in case. I like people who only do one thing in Eve often are motivated by it being optimal in some way.
Right.
And I'm not coming here to tell people that number goes up isn't a great way to play Eve. I really like number goes up in addition. Like I like my PvP number to go up in particular, but is it kind of shopping around for more things to do is a good thing in general. I think that CCP has been trying to give people like a big list of here is where you go to see all the things you could be doing. I think that the agency could be expanded upon, certainly, but also the agency does have a lot of options for players. I think that if you, as a player, ever wonder what should you do next, try building a community, try joining a community, try like finding a niche or not niche activity to recruit other people into.
So now we're going to look at our solo players. We all know these players that absolutely refuse to get into a fleet for whatever their reasons are. How would you encourage solo players to get into the group activities?
Yeah, as long as this is like they want to, I guess. Like I do hear stats once in a while about like the number of people who just log in after a stressful job day of having lots of meetings, and the last thing that they want to do is talk to people. Like let them just enjoy their thing. But if you are searching for a community and that's what would make the game more fun, I think that going on Reddit or going on Discord, the official Discord, to like find groups to play with, like absolutely do that. Reach out to like anyone on the CSM. They will steer you in the right direction as well. Like I've talked to people in that capacity as a CSM representative. Like they say like, hey, I don't know which wormhole group to choose, or what sub null group has the most fun. Stuff like that. They're the community will help you find the right community.
Do you think that CCP should consider putting more solo activities into the game instead of just abyssals and exploration?
Yeah, and I think that really comes back to the any play session length should have something to do. Or like I say any. I think that if you log on to Eve in your lunch break, that shouldn't be a wasted time spent. Like you can eat a sandwich and play Eve at the same time. I think that there should be something to do, and that's probably going to be solo. It's maybe hard to sync up your 20 or 30-minute play session with somebody else. I think that in that regard, exploration and abyssals are quite good, and like having the same exist for mining and huge shout out to abyssal arenas. Like I would love to have abyssal arenas back. I know that there's an entire community who would like that. Um, like, please give them to us. I would really really like that. But like all the activities in Eve should ideally have something that can be done in 20 to 30 minutes without spilling over too much. Like go have a 1v1 cruiser fight that isn't like too hard to find without having to like burn 10 jumps and not necessarily having to live in faction warfare, even though if what you want is a small 1v1 fight, quite often it's a good place to be.
So, do you think that the solo activities should be in space where they can be caught like anybody else, or like D&D sites like Abyssals?
I think that has to be like a balancing thing. I don't want to categorically say that abyssals shouldn't exist because they're more or less safe, or the opposite, saying like if you want to mine, you have to open yourself up to like maximum possibility of being ganked either. I think that's a spectrum. I think that if you are in an open world situation, you should make more money and have more risk, and vice versa. You should make less money if you are safer. But like it's ideally we don't want too much to instance
Right.
stuff in Eve. Like that's one of the big selling points of Eve is like everything is consequences, everything is
Yes.
dangerous potentially, everything could lead to PvP. I know that I'm asking for abyssal arenas, and I do think that the abyss is a good thing for the game, but like being ganked on the way in and on the way out is a good thing to have, and I don't think it should be overdone. I think abyssal arenas being open all the time for everyone might not be the way to go. And I think like leaderboard rewards also might have contributed to that being an issue as well.
I agree with that. So, we're going to switch gears, and since you are currently sitting on the CSM, I have a bunch of specific questions just for you. So, who did you work with the most during your CSM term? Both CSM and CCP.
In terms of the CSM candidates, Mick Fightmaster, Drake Iden, Young Puke, in no particular order, were the CSM members I interacted with the most on, like, talking about changes that we wanted and so on. Like, I did interact with all of the
Of course.
people there, but like some of the groups have more overlap, and some people just are more chatty, and I was a little bit surprised at the amount of one-on-one dev time that happens, and also the amount of like smaller projects that people will like go and they'll have a side conversation with a dev for a while, and they'll come back and they'll present it as like this is more or less completed. It doesn't necessarily have to be a big thing or a small thing. I had a number of one-on-ones with Okami that were more about like the general direction of Eve and like the nature of fun in video games, that which weren't necessarily about like I want this to be 10% more. CCP Nomad amazing.
He is.
I worked with him so much. That was great. CCP Rampart also was like he has too much work capacity. He probably needs to chill out a bit. But yeah, he does amazing work. He worked a lot with Drake as well on Potchfin in
Often.
particular. And my favorite team of CCP K1P1 and Cutgood who do the little things, and
Yeah.
I got so many little things done this year. I answer absolutely everyone who sends me a message, and if they have a suggestion, I will put it into my massive spreadsheet of suggestions to CCP. I would say about 30% of the messages that I get are asking for something that is like pretty popular to ask for.
Yep.
ACL hangers, more bookmarks, stuff of that nature. Then it goes into like my stats page so that I can like show CCP like I've had 57 people ask for ACL hangers in the last month. Let's find a way. Or it's a novel suggestion, and in which case lots of UI suggestions that are great. We got through a ton of them, like being able to interact with skyhooks without having to be in space for them. What double clicking on different market orders brings you to in the market interface, like so that you can click on a completed order to bring up the market for that again. Just like a whole bunch of small things that got put into the game that just make the game smoother, more seamless in a day-to-day capacity.
So, if you make it back onto the CSM for CSM20, what other types of candidates, like their expertise, do you think is much needed on the council?
I think there's some archetypes, and I think that they often come from different areas of space, regardless of what kind of playstyle they have. So, for instance, Ariel Rin, who comes in and is like super knowledgeable about ESI. I think that like we should always have somebody who has that as their expertise. Um, Drake and Oz and Angry Mustache being people who like really go in depth in the MER and look at that a bunch and like are able to inform us more about game health and tie like in-game events or in-game like changes in how the activities work to like real stats that we are getting from CCP. Like that helps inform decisions in a really good way. And then we have people who are niche specialists. Last year we had like Sedo, who had a lot to say about capitals. We have small gangers. We have big fleet FCs. We have people who do SOV and wormholes and all of that. I think that we really need a full mix of that. And it doesn't always boil down entirely to what space people live in. We have people advocating for new players from every area of space. We have people advocating for PvP from every area of space. It like people who are voting in the CSM should really look at what their candidates bring to the
Yep.
table and not dismiss them offhand because I don't live in Highsec or I don't live in wormholes or I don't live in nullsec. Like all the candidates have something extra to bring to the table.
Do you think that nullsec is overly represented now that you've been on the CSM, or do you think that having at least half out in nullsec as candidates is a good balance to six who are more the rest of the game?
I am a little bit hesitant to say yes in that regard. I think that because this is like a purely popular contest and voting blocks exist, and like there's nothing in the system other than maybe the CCP picks to address it. Like, of course, there are more nullsec candidates than we need if you look at it from a nullsec candidates go on to the CSM to talk about nullsec stuff point of view. I would say that for myself, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about nullsec things. We weren't really changing Solve all that much. Like, certainly there was feedback from Equinox to be dealt with, but a lot of that groundwork had been laid by your term of CSM. And again, like, Ariel Wren isn't there to talk about nullsec. He's there to talk about ESI for the most part. Like, everyone really has opinions on every area of space for the most part. Maybe a little bit less like wormholes and Parchman, but at the end of the day, I think that all the areas of space also should have like a distinct conflict zone, or like some sort of friction between them that makes them want to interact, whether it's nullsec to highsec trade or nullsec to lowsec like fights, not necessarily taking over each other's space or being robbed by wormholers. Like, everyone has skin in the entire game. But I don't really know how the voting system would be changed to have fewer nullsec candidates. I suspect that CCP is not going to pick nullsecers additionally for the 2 extra picks anytime soon.
Right.
They might do that if the candidate is like a subject matter expert on something outside of nullsec, but I think that also the community would let them know if we had, say, 7 nullsec candidates a year and then CCP picked an 8th. I think people would be pretty upset.
I think their voices would be heard on that one. And speaking of voices being heard, you said that you have a spreadsheet where you put people's suggestions in, and that you basically show the stats to CCP and whatnot. Is this the only way that you demonstrated player support, or were there other ways that you were able to present player support for different issues?
One of my big issues going into last year was actually trying to get CCP to help out with gender changes for characters and name changes as well. Although I recognize that as a way more controversial topic because of the mechanics of Eve. But we did get gender changes, so that was one of the big things that I'd campaigned on in like certain communities, I should say. And I wasn't the first to suggest that by any means. I'm not taking credit for it, but I was able to bug them about it a decent amount. And I think that a lot of small issues in various communities matter a lot. For instance, the cenotaph changes, although they absolutely did not go far enough in the latest balance pass, was very strongly asked for by the wormhole community, where cenotaphs are kind of skewing the entire meta. Currently, since the forward operating bases have been moved into lowsec, it's annoying the snot out of lowsecers that their metanox are being reinforced, and if they're reinforced at exactly the right time, they don't auto repair, and there's like certain things will just like pop up very suddenly, unannounced, through like ramifications of changes that didn't really intend to do this, and the communities will feel very strongly about it. And that's the kind of thing where in the CSM meetings, the weekly CSM meetings, will like remind the devs like for 5 minutes at the end of each meeting, like, please, let's talk about this, and like put us in touch with the dev who can fix this, or like we really care about this quite a bit. And then that's also the kind of times where we'll maybe go to people a little bit higher up in the system and say, like, I want to talk to like the game directors about like this is actually something that we care a lot about. This isn't like a let's wait and see kind of thing. It's like, please, this is a pain point right now. And I think CCP has been incredibly good this year. I have nothing to compare that to other than what CCP and other CSM members say about the situation. But I've felt heard in every situation that I've brought to them, and they trust that I will moderate so that like the important things get a little bit more pressure towards them, and then if it's not that important, I will just put it on Confluence, the internal wiki, or I will put it in the Slack channel for devs to read at their leisure. Like, if something is important, we'll look at it sooner, and if it's not, we'll get to it when we get to it.
So undoubtedly, if your CSM experience is anything like mine, there were topics that came up either from your fellow CSM or CCP that you completely and totally disagreed with. How did you handle it?
There was one thing that came up during the summit this year that was like an absolute, like, we cannot have this. And in that case, it was like, for most people on the CSM, this was pretty bad. And we were expecting somewhat of a discussion like adjacent to this topic. So all of the CSM got together and we talked quite a bit, and we like got a list of things that we were willing to live with and a list of things that we weren't willing to live with, and we ranked them, and we got to a CSM consensus before we went back to CCP, and we said, we don't want what you suggested. Here is what we want instead. And we didn't get the thing that we hated. But on the other hand, I do hear stories of a similar thing having been done previously where, like, that wasn't taken into consideration. And we got a very unpopular decision made. And then in hindsight, it was as bad as the CSM said. And to some extent, I think that this depends a little bit on how much effort has gone into it before it's presented to us. Like, if they've already spent months making it and then we say we hate it, they'll still want to try it.
Yep.
And I get the impression that CCP tried to come to us much sooner. CCP Swift spends a lot of time advocating for the CSM to be very effective. And one of the biggest things that it seems like he does is sneaking around the office, finding the rumors of what's being worked on and bringing it to us as soon as possible so that nobody's time is wasted. And like, maybe we'll get like suddenly something in the next expansion that nobody's ever heard of, but I don't think that's very likely anymore. I think that they're doing a very good job of running everything by us.
So was there any disagreements among you and the other CSM that you had to work out?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, it's a good thing that we aren't the ones implementing the things. Like, certainly we'll have disagreements of like implementations, and then CCP is there to ultimately be the game designers. I found that the way that the ship balance thing worked for the latest patch was very interesting. And to some extent, I came into this and I said, like, these are the ships that I think are way too good, like the F&I, or severely underused, like the Confessor and the Maelstrom and like some of the other ships, right? And then that's kind of my initial contribution. And then CCP goes and they do what they actually are supposed to do, which is be game designers. And they'll come back to us and they'll say, like, hey, we did this thing to this ship and we did this thing to that ship. How do you like it? And in some cases, I'll say, yes, I love it. And in some cases, I say, I don't think that's it. And then they'll go and iterate and they'll come back with another version of the same thing. And then we'll more or less be on the same page that, like, it's a change and it's better than it was. And we should try this. And some things are obviously for the different CSM, like, bigger in effect for them. Like, myself and Mick really wanted the Cenotaph to be nerfed quite a bit more than it was because it matters a lot to us in Wormholes, but it doesn't matter nearly that much to other areas of space where they might say, like, let's be more conservative about that. And that's like a disagreement, but it's not like a let's fight over it. I mean, I've heard stories about previous CSMs where, like, there were battle lines drawn in the CSM on certain issues. We didn't have that. Or if we did, I didn't notice them. I'm pretty sure that all our disagreements this year were pretty minor and we were all going in the same direction, if not at exactly the same pace.
Were you surprised about how much you had to use like your people skills and your debate skills and diplomacy when interacting with everybody that was involved in the CSM, both CCP and the CSM side, or was it about what you expected?
I think it was more or less what I expected. I had some issues, like, for instance, the name change that I wanted to bring up as a discussion, not like a demand that we should now have name changes in the game, but like finding out whether or not this is a, like, are there any deal breakers in terms of, like, getting this into the game. In that case, I actually wrote to everyone involved on the CSM and some of the CCP devs to, like, outline that I was going to bring this up. And that's kind of how I expected more things to be on the CSM. This was like for the summit, so it was one of the earliest things that I did. And my surprise was that a lot more stuff happens kind of behind the scenes where instead of telling all the CSM and then canvassing all of them and then talking to the dev, I could just go straight to the dev and talk to them about some changes and use my own judgment as to whether or not it's going to be controversial. Because most things aren't that controversial. Like, one of the things that I got into the game this time was I hate splitting stacks in order to sell loot to NPCs, whether it's blue loot or red loot or whatever. So I asked the dev nicely if he could just put the NPC buy orders to be like very large numbers. They're now 999,999 for like anything that an NPC wants to buy like that. So we don't have to split stacks anymore. Like, nobody else on the CSM has any input on that negatively. So that just goes through, right? Nobody has to, like, talk about it. Whereas something big like the capital changes, like the Titan Doomsday and the plate bonuses for super capitals and Titans and Surgical Strike was a big discussion, despite people being mostly in agreement that it would be good to revert it. Like, we talked a lot about it, and then it happened, and then we're gonna still see what ramifications it has in, like, the bigger scale, but I guess a lot of the changes were more between individual CSM members or groups of them and the devs, rather than, like, every discussion requiring input from 20 different people before we voted or something like that. If I were to say something that was hated by even, like, a couple of people, or even just one person, I suspect, I don't know, if they sufficiently advocated against it, I think that CCP probably would shoot it down as well. So being a little bit conservative in like the magnitude of the changes is a good idea, because I think CCP wants like the majority of people to feel positive about it and nobody to absolutely hate it
Yeah.
for it to go through.
Yeah, that was largely my experience as well. I was surprised about how many people were having one-on-one conversations, but yeah, in hindsight, when the whole high-sec incursion incident happened, it's like I'm the only one running high-sec incursions. Nobody else is. Why are we going to have a big hour-long discussion about changing how long it takes to pop the mothership?
Yeah.
Just popped in with the null CSM to make sure that we're doing the right thing by them, and we went on with the day. Same with home fronts and stuff like that. If no one else is running that content, it's kind of useless. But
Yeah, for sure.
I do have one question. Last year, probably like the biggest topic, the biggest issue, everybody in the CSM who PvPs or is a nullsec or any type of wars was projection. Do you feel that the projection problem is now solved, or do you think this is going to be going into CSM20 as well?
It's not solved. I think that we got some changes to it, and I think that the entire CSM is like more or less evenly distributed on a scale between people who think that I know that there's one person who feels like this is it. We don't need any more. And I think that on the other end of the scale are people who think that this absolutely was not enough. And because of that, you just need one person who thinks that it's not enough to like bring it back up as a discussion. But I don't think it was solved either. We asked for things for projection that we haven't gotten yet, but that I'm still pretty confident that we might get. One of them is one of my pet projects, which is like looking at drifter wormholes a bit closer.
Okay.
I think that they give a lot of projection that like it is not ansiplexes, so it's open to everyone. But we have also gotten more wormhole connections throughout space in the latest patch. So I think that if anything, projection is just a tiny bit up. Okay. The other like Brave moved twice during my term in the CSM, and Goons moved twice during my term in the CSM, and right before that we had Equinox and some changes, and Brave went from we'll maybe have like 3 to 5 ansiplexes in our space to like my entire map is just filled with green lines at the moment. I think that they're not only do we need to have discussions about projection like holistically, but I think that maybe there's a little bit much in the way of like managing it as well currently. There certainly are a lot of ansiplexes, and some of them like I saw stats yesterday from our own space of like how many units of liquid ozone each ansiplex uses. Ooh. in a time period, and some of them are used extensively. Like if it's like 1 or 2 jumps from our staging, like it's a lot. And the ones that are the furthest out was like you could fit all the liquid ozone that Ansiplex uses in one frigate. So like the purpose of that Ansiplex was like one person took a hauler through it once. And maybe if we're putting up ansiplexes for one person taking one hauler once a month, like they're too many.
Yeah.
Maybe. But I know that Young Puke is looking at ansiplexes from not ansiplexes, projection from a point of view of like nullsec coming into and disrupting faction warfare a little bit more than they should.
Okay.
I think I'm not necessarily 100% convinced of like the cause and effect there, because like nullsec is by its very nature quite close to lowsec. So I think that that might also have like a more complex discussion around it as to what is actually causing the issues. But yeah, projection will definitely be talked about next year as well. And this year, everyone in the CSM was game to talk about it. We all had the discussion. Everyone was involved. Like we really saw the writing on the wall in terms of like this is something everyone has to talk about.
Did
I
you
don't know if it will have that status next year.
did you feel that CCP was receptive to it?
I mean, yeah, they were in the discussion. We had a discussion first, and then we had a
Yeah.
discussion with them, also so that we could effectively manage our and their time. Like we nominated one of our members to like be MC basically and tell everyone like you get to speak for 2 minutes and then you get to speak for 2 minutes and like everyone laid out their arguments. It was the most productive discussion I've ever had in any context anywhere.
That's awesome.
Like I'm not joking about that, but then once we've presented everything to CCP, like they didn't 100% go for everything. So
Yeah, that's about on par, I think.
yeah.
So I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
This one's probably going to be hard. What question do you think should be asked of the CSM during these interviews, but never gets asked?
A question that never gets asked of the CSM.
But should be asked of the candidates.
Yeah, to some extent, I think like there are some candidates who like don't want to engage with certain like bigger topics that define Eve as a whole. That might be like multi-boxing, scamming, high sec ganking, like the kind of taboo subjects in Eve that I'm not saying any of those need to change, but they might change just in order to make sure that Eve stays relevant as a game that like we can invite new players to, and it kind of like exists within like the greater like MMO universe, I should say. Like for instance, Eve is probably one of the only games where like changing character appearance and so on has been very difficult up until now.
Right.
And that's kind of something that a lot of people expect from a modern MMO. The ability to like customize our ships was something that like Eve was very late to bring in. So maybe as a CSM candidate, what do most other games have that Eve doesn't have that you'd like to bring in?
Oh, that's a good question. All right, so that is the end of the questions. You're out of the hot seat. Your final statement: why should players vote for you, and why should both of my communities put you on our ballots?
I think people should vote for me because I have quite a bit of time to devote to the CSM. I will say that I probably spent at least an hour, if not more, every single day on the CSM and on CSM related matters. I answer every question that is asked of me. I'm willing to have a discussion with anyone who reaches out until the discussion is complete. Some of these are being quite long, and sometimes people just want like a ban appeal or and there have been a decent amount, not a ton, but like some people who definitely who got caught up in like something by accident.
Yep.
Bug reports. File your bug reports, people. Every time you see a bug, you should file a bug report. And There's a whole system around it, please. It will make the game so much better. Bug reports, suggestions, small things, all sorts of things. I could not have imagined exactly what things that people come to me with that would get put into the game or would get fixed for them. But I have been very pleasantly surprised by the amount of things that
Mm-hmm.
have gone positively like that. So I think new player focus, getting stuff done for you in particular, of course help you whether you vote for me or not. And for your communities, I think that the new player focus again is important. And I have a lot of experience in many areas of space, so like that helps your wormhole community and Eve rookies. I love as a community myself. I fly with the AT team led by Kevin. That's great fun, and I try to participate when I can.
Awesome. Where can people find you on the internet? Your discords or
I'm on the official Discord. I'm actually not entirely sure if they've changed my name back yet or not. I'm on the official forum. Um, I'm on Reddit. I'm in game, obviously. I'm on so many Eve Discords. In fact, like if you search for Dujek on Eve Discord and I'm there, like reach out to me. Like I have my CSM candidate post on the official forums has a list of places to contact me as
awesome.
well.
We'll get that in the description as well as all the other places. Do you answer your Eve mail?
Yeah, I do. It's probably the slowest way to get a hold of me, uh, I should say. And in fact, after I found out this year, I'm embarrassed to say that you can log in directly to a character and bypass the login screen by just clicking on and holding on a character. That has been disastrous for checking my email within like 10 minutes of waking up because I might go onto my market character first and then go on to do check, but I do check my email every day. So it is a good way to get a hold of me.
Excellent. All right, folks, I will have everything down in the description. So if you want to get a hold of him or look at a certain question, there'll be chapters. And thank you so much for coming to the interview, and best of luck.
Thank you very much.